The Batavia, a formidable Dutch ship adorned with 24 cannons, embarked on its maiden voyage on October 29, 1628, from Texel, Netherlands. Its destination was the capital of the Dutch East Indies, a land abundant with prized spices. The journey was led by Francisco Pelsaert, the senior merchant, alongside Arian Jacobs, the seasoned captain. Despite their common purpose, these men shared a bitter animosity born from a public rebuke in Dutch Surrey. Along with them was Geronimo Cornelis, a young and desperate junior merchant escaping possible arrest back home due to his controversial spiritual affiliations. As the Batavia sailed through the treacherous seas, it carried an ambitious crew, all aware of the dangers lurking due to navigational challenges. Sailing along the Brouwer route, they headed south of the direct course to Jakarta as instructed, lacking the means to accurately measure longitude, making the northern turn towards safer waters a gamble. Pelsaert, mindful of the risks, was constantly at odds with the impulsive Jacobs, whose grudge fueled a silent rebellion. Tension rippled through the corridors of the ship, the air heavy with suspicion and ragged ambition. Cornelis watched from the shadows, his mind weaving insidious plans, eager for an opportunity to seize control amidst the chaos. He concocted a conspiracy to overthrow the hierarchy, driven by desperation and illusions of grandeur. As the ship pushed forward, navigational mistakes loomed with each passing day. Mutiny whispered among the crew, fueled by want and divided leadership unable to reconcile years of resentment. One ill-fated evening, as storm clouds gathered, the Batavia veered off course, edging dangerously close to the unfamiliar Australian coastline. Unaware of the impending catastrophe, Captain Jacobs quarreled with Pelsaert over who was to blame for their faring plight. The distraction proved costly. Suddenly, the mighty ship met its misfortune. A sickening crunch reverberated as would met the coral in a brutal standoff against the Australian reef. Panic ignited chaos, leaving the crew fighting against the unyielding tide as Cornelis seized the moment to orchestrate his sinister mutiny amidst the ruin. As Pelsaert and Jacobs squabbled, the future of Batavia hung precariously, the festering seeds of betrayal flourishing within the volatile tempest of their shattered voyage. In the early 17th century, the Dutch East India Company deployed a fleet of ships bearing treasures and trading goods to the exotic lands of the East Indies. One such ship, the Batavia, departed from the Cape of Good Hope laden with a bounty of gold, silver, and precious lives, all unknowing of the mutinous hearts beating beneath deck. Jacob Jacobs, the scheming captain, and Geronimus Cornelis, a devious apothecary, harbored ambition beyond their recognitions. Pelsaert's account, the commander of the fleet, unveiled a sinister plot brewed in the shadowed corners of the Batavia. Their conspiracy aimed to commandeer the wealth of the ship, intending to disappear into a new existence, far from the watchful eyes of authority. With cold calculation, Jacob steered the Batavia away from the fleet's protective watch, drifting it off course after their stopover for supplies. Isolated and vulnerable, the ship bobbed helplessly upon the vast Indian Ocean. Amidst this desolation, a tragedy staged by Jacobs and Cornelis played out under the guise of chaos. A vile act was committed against the young noblewoman, Lucretia Jones, intended to invoke the captain's wrath against the crew, sowing seeds of distrust and discontent among the ranks. However, despite their meticulous plotting, Jones could not identify her attackers, thwarting their plans to sow dissension. Yet the storm of fate was far from over. On June 4, 1629, as dawn broke with silent splendor, the Batavia was ruthlessly run aground on the jagged reefs of Beacon Island, part of the treacherous Houtman of Brolhos Islands. With the ship's belly torn open by coral teeth, the sea greedily claimed 40 souls. The remnants of the 322 passengers and crew found refuge on nearby barren islands, meager in their offerings of life-sustaining resources, facing the specter of thirst and starvation. Pelsert and Jacobs took to the seas once more, joining with a few officers and passengers in a desperate search for salvation on distant shores. Their path aimed north, seeking not just water, but hope at Batavia in the Dutch East Indies. Their journey carved against the currents, a tale etched in infamy. Amidst the harsh winds and stark horizon, the fate of the Batavia's survivors lay tethered to the capricious whims of the sea. Thus unfurled the dark chapter of the Batavia, a story of human frailty and the relentless thirst for power played upon tumultuous waves. Pelsert documented that on June 15, 1629, the group found water at a latitude they estimated at about 23 degrees south. They stayed overnight, noting the region's termite mounds and a plague of flies. They eventually reached Nusa Kambangan Island in the East Indies, completing a perilous 33-day journey with no fatalities. Upon arrival, Jan Everts, the skipper, was executed for negligence and misconduct related to the ship's loss. Jacobs was also arrested but denied involvement in the mutiny plans. Pelsert was promptly tasked with leading the Sardam to rescue the survivors and recover the ship's treasure. After a month-long search, he arrived to find a horrifying scene of mass murder among the survivors, with over 100 killed. During the mutiny, Cornwallis had taken control of the survivors, planning to hijack any rescue vessel and establish a new kingdom using the shipwreck's gold and silver. To consolidate power, he hoarded weapons and supplies, sending soldiers under Weeb Hayes to a nearby island on the pretext of searching for water. Cornwallis anticipated their failure and left them to die, enabling him to dominate the remaining survivors. Cornwallis orchestrated killings under fabricated accusations, intending to reduce the population to a manageable number. Over time, his followers killed 110 people, including women and children, while keeping a few women as enslaved concubines. Juns was among those held by Cornwallis. Despite being abandoned, Hayes and his soldiers discovered fresh water and food on their island. Learning of the massacres from escapees, they prepared makeshift weapons and built a small limestone and coral fort. When Cornwallis sent forces to eliminate Hayes' group, the better-nourished soldiers repelled multiple attacks. Cornwallis himself was captured after attempting negotiations, and his remaining followers were later subdued with the arrival of the Sardam. Pelsert conducted a trial on the islands. Cornwallis and several of his men were executed, with their hands cut off before hanging. Others were flogged or tortured. Two mutineers, Wouter Loos and Jan Pelgrim de Bay, were marooned on the Australian mainland, becoming the first Europeans to live there permanently. Out of the original 332 on board, only 122 reached Batavia. The Sardam eventually returned to the Netherlands with most of the treasure salvaged from the Batavia. Today, artifacts from the wreck are displayed in Australian museums, while the site remains a popular diving location.